All right, everybody. Did everybody get a handout? Gary was just bringing them around. Should say session 5, behavioral approaches. Before we start, and I'll try to remember to remind you at the end. Our original schedule would have had us finishing next week. Oh, wait one moment. I need to ring the bell here. They're chatty crew. We're good. Good? Okay. So our original schedule would have had us finishing next week on the 25th. But there's a young man that needs to move to college on the 25th, and I'd like to be there for that. So next week, Pastor Meyer is going to be here with us. He'll do the service. He'll do a brief Bible study here in the hall. He needs to leave a little early to go pick up his wife, who has duties over at Emmanuel. But he'll do a brief study down here in the hall. The next week is our Labor Day picnic, so it's actually going to be September 8th before we'll do the final session. So if you needed to do some catch-up reading or anything like that, we're giving you some extra weeks of grace here. But today is kind of, last week and this week really tie together. If you were here last week, the number of times we said, yeah, we're going to talk about that next week. It's next week now. So thank you so much to Gary for being willing to lead our discussion today, focusing on chapter 8 in the text about behavioral approaches with mental health. So this is not easy to do. So Gary, thank you very much.
Well, before we get into the meat of it, I just want to say a few words ahead of time. A lot of you people have known me for a long, long time. A little over 2 years ago, my wife passed away, and she was here all the time, and huge part of my life for 45, 50 years. And I had never thought of myself as someone who had mental health problems, and even when a mental health situation, I won't say a problem, because I had a tremendous amount of support here, which is, I just can't tell you people, those of you that helped me out, I just am forever grateful. And also, it's interesting, Luther spoke about the importance of being with people, and I had that kind of group here, and it was amazing, amazing, amazing. People that have a long-term friend or spouse or someone like that die, who don't have anybody close. I also have 2 sons with beautiful wives and 5 grandkids, and that helped too. But here was where it helped. But aside from that, though, I also found great solace in being by myself sometimes too, going out on my kayaking, going fishing, and seeing nature, and seeing the birds and the beaver and the deer coming down to the lake and everything else like that. And just got to appreciate the beauty of God's creation. So I was by myself, but I really wasn't. I had things to keep my mind occupied, and things to it gave me a lot of time to think and figure out how blessed I am. So I just want to say that before we start. So anyway. So I passed out these sheets, and we had all the readings on them, and we're not going to take the time today to go through them, because otherwise we won't be able to get to the meat. But basically, there's a lot of talk that the Saunders came out with about behavior in the Bible, about how we need people, how we need fellowship, how we need to have support, and that's just a huge, huge part of it. All right. So the Bible is replete with advice about behavior, including behavior of the righteous and the need to support others. It warns about the danger of isolation, encouraging instead community and fellowship. It also has many examples of the value of solitude. So I think I touched on that just a little bit, but it has to be a balance, and it has to be, solitude is good for time to think, but there's a difference between solitude and isolation is not good. Solitude and time to converse with God, to converse with yourself, and find out where you are in life and stuff like that. But I will admit, maybe I didn't show it because either the tough German exterior, or playing sports for 8 years, or being in the military, or all those things, I tried not to show it, but it was there. And especially, like I said, the first 8 months was a tough time. But one of our parishioners, Don Rohde, who has been next to me up in the choir loft, and every Sunday he He was a co-leader of a group of people who, over at the Watermark in Southbury, where there were a bunch of people there. It's a, it's a retirement community, and of course, there's people that have lost loved ones there. We had, and at the time, he started up a group probably like just after November, and it was tough to go there. Not tough because I didn't want to go, but tough because after 3 weeks, I came out of there feeling like I felt worse than when I went. There were, for those of you who don't know, Linda passed away while we were out working in the vegetable garden. We were both together when it happened. And, it happened, it was totally unexpected, but it went, instantaneously. She stood up, she said, "Oh my God," and tipped over backwards. I mean, that's how quick it was. So, a lot of people there at this group that Don was leading, they went through months and even years of seeing a loved one decline. And I came out of there after hearing their long stories about, how long it was and now the emptiness. And I said to myself, I totally miss my wife and everything else, but I didn't have to go through that suffering. So, that was just a huge part of it. But anyway, after 3 weeks, I was ready to quit. And we went like 3 Fridays in a row, and then we took one off. We did that. And if Don hadn't been next to me up in the choir loft every Wednesday and Sunday, I probably would have, but I couldn't do that to him. So, and then face him the next week. So, but I stuck it out, and after about 10 weeks, the light came on. And one of the most important things, and it relates somewhat to this, is that we got to an area where they talked about, what do you do now? What are you going to do with the rest of your life? And it was described as a life being by a book, like a book. You go chapter by chapter, and sometimes you have to, close the chapter and start writing another one. And and that's where it hit home. I'll never forget all the good times we had, and I didn't want to see myself, wither away. And particularly after seeing what happened with my dad after my mom passed away. He never did much of anything anymore. He became isolated, and he withered away. And I said, not going to happen. So anybody who's in that situation, the getting comfort in other people is huge. Getting comfort from your church is beyond huge, beyond huge. So I just wanted to say a little bit more. Anyway, so to summarize, the Bible tells us that being alone is bad, except when it is done for our good. Isolating ourselves is dangerous, and receiving the gifts of God's word within the community of saints is central to life within the body of Christ. Being alone at time for prayers and meditation, however, is also important to the life of faith. It can help us recover when we're wearied by our burdens. So now we'll start getting into some of the meat of what Saunders was talking about and see how it relates to what Martin Luther told us.
If I could throw in,
Please.
I really like the distinction you're making. I think you drew it out even better than Saunders, the distinction between isolation and solitude. One of those can be very restorative, the other can lead to withering away. And so while we're going to go into some of the things, and Saunders, the other thing is he really focuses not exclusively on that, but he really emphasizes that. And I think there are other aspects of behavioral approaches that are worth making sure that we're aware of as well. However, I think with his clinical practice and everything, he's seen enough of the way that isolation, rather than solitude, times of solitude, wonderfully restorative and helpful. Isolation is when you lose the ability to even be able to be with people. And that's then a concern. That might happen in a situation I think you drew the distinction nicely. Grief is not a mental health problem, but it is a problem for your mental health, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think, and those of us who walked through it with you, you handled it extremely well under very difficult circumstances. But I think that what we also want to make sure to draw out is that behavioral approaches to how behavior affects our thinking don't just spin around the axis of are you getting enough time with other people. It's an important part, and it's a part that Saunders really emphasizes. I want to make sure we're going to draw some of those out as well, but I really liked what you said, the difference between solitude and isolation. I think that's really helpful.
Okay.
So, everything you said, I totally, I'm right in line with you there. But I think even, withering away is definitely a very real concern, right? But also, people might find their way into choosing self-destructive behaviors even worse. That's a very real and concerning decision that too many people might make.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, full disclosure here, I mean, I think everybody here knows that I enjoy a beer or a drink, but when it gets to 2 or 3 a night, and I saw myself, falling into that
Going
trap.
down that path.
I saw it, yeah, in that first period of time, and I was able to wean myself back, luckily. You pray about it. You pray, yes you do, yes you do. Yes,
Hi, I was thinking about, sometimes people just keep themselves so busy so that they don't have to take time. They can't be alone because they're afraid to be alone.
Yep.
So,
and, yeah,
and that way, who's working in the system? The system, the same rules. And he is so, keeping us so busy and occupied in all kinds of things so that we don't have time to stop and think. Because if you stop and think, and God's inside of you, He will let you know you need some time for yourself to balance yourself. Because if you don't, you will be depressed, and you will be alone, and you will isolate. So there's got to be a balance. So God is the one that keeps us straight.
Absolutely.
So, I was thinking that, I said, wow, we go through all kinds of sufferings in this world, and sometimes we think we can handle it ourselves. But no, there's a creator that can help you in every single pain that's out there. He wants you to come. That's why you're not going to spend yourself.
Keep-
So that you can recognize that you don't have to be alone.
keeping busy
Yeah.
does not make the pain go away, and it does not solve the problem. It just, you have something to keep you occupied, but you haven't gone and taken that next step of, getting yourself to the place where, you're back on even keel. But you're right, just keeping busy is not the answer, not the answer at all. Would somebody like to read the, just in behavior and mental health, the opening line and then maybe the first paragraph? Rob?
All right.
Thank you.
Behaviors that are particularly bad for mental health are social isolation and lack of participation in enjoyable activities, which leads to an unhealthy lifestyle. Social withdrawal and isolation. Persons with mental health problems most inevitably withdraw from others. This is because they look to future events and cannot imagine that they will enjoy themselves. Persons with anxiety can get into similar vicious cycles. Due to thinking that they will be anxious in a situation, they avoid the situation. As a result, they do not learn that the situation is not as dangerous or as scary as they imagine.
Any thoughts or comments on that? Charlotte?
I just, Susie will reflect on that, I guess, under social withdrawal, that statement. So I'm going to just take things out of context. They cannot look to the future, they look to the future and cannot imagine that they will enjoy themselves. And that is so true. You really, because you're, and I think that's, we're kind of in this grief cycle here, what we're talking about. So it's true. I remember after my husband died, I went shopping with my girlfriend. And she said, oh, look, this is pretty, that's pretty. She says, why do I want to buy anything? The man I love is not here for me to dress up for. She says, oh, that'll pass, Charlotte. And sure, in the board, as I like to say, it does. It's hard to see when you're in the thick of things that there is light on the other side. But with the help of the church and the Holy Spirit and just getting all the help you need, there is life on the other side.
Very, very true. Helen?
I think it's good to try to remember also that we are all suffering in some sort of way. Like, we're not alone, right? Like, we don't know what the person sitting next to us is feeling or going through. So we think we are isolated, we unworthy sometimes, but I think it's very, very common, much more common than what we think. And I think remembering that it's good for two things. Number one, we're not alone. The person sitting next to you may be very much on the same boat or similar. Number two, remember compassion, because you never know what the person next to you is going through. And so making a little effort to reach out, and sometimes just one small word will make a world of difference reaching out to the person next to you.
And even though perhaps you have pain and you see someone with pain, what you have is not necessarily their problem. So one of the worst things you can say is, you should do this, instead of saying, oh, have you tried this, or what do you think about trying something like that? And the other thing that was just hit on here briefly is having a predisposition that it's not going to be fun, or it's not going to be good. You know, if you've already go out to do something, you say, well, I'm going, but they forced me to go and I'm not going to have a good time. I mean, that's a sign that, you're not going to have a good time. If you say, well, I haven't done this before, but, I'm going to try it, and things like that, and you open your eyes, and as long as your spirit will take things that other people try to help you with, and it may not all be for you, and you can say, oh yeah, that was okay, but I think I'd like to try something else, or thank you so much for your time, but I'm going to go in a little different direction. So those kind of things are important too, to recognize what works for you. And as someone who's trying to give help to someone, don't try and force feed it down their throat, because that is probably about the worst thing you could do. Yes?
Yeah, a little bit of a backtrack to self-destructive behaviors, right? But also what you're talking about, the differences in the way people find to act out in these situations. There's 12-step fellowship for almost anything and everything, not just Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, but people get in trouble with all kinds of different things, right? So overeating, eating the wrong things, there's Overeaters Anonymous, there's Emotions Anonymous, there's all these different things that people find their way into obsessive compulsive disorders. And there's a fellowship for just about anything out there if you look for it too.
And Saunders goes, and as we go through here, he mentions overeating, he mentions not being able to sleep, all these different things that can, keep the cycle going downward, and the cone keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller, like a whirlpool.
Because like we learn in some of these fellowships, the human person, right, we're not only made up of physical health and mental health, but emotional health and spiritual health. And we have to find a balance within all of these things to be in the most healthy and functional place that we could be in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, I found a tremendous amount of support and help within these walls here. I just can't even imagine what it could have been like, but it was just a truly eye-opening. And so, would someone want to read the next section? It talks about enjoyable things. We have a volunteer. Gotcha.
Enjoyable things. Lack of enjoyment might be due to anhedonia, which translates as without pleasure. Someone with anhedonia will engage in behavior that previously gave them pleasure and find that they no longer enjoy it. Thus does Luther so often cajole those with depression and anxiety. You must go do fun things such as ride, play music, play games, and so forth. Note that Luther was not saying, and you should not say, you will have fun. Rather, Luther was saying, as you should say, do it because it will be good for you.
Thank you. Any thoughts on that?
I think part of what I'll throw in here, staying in the context of what we've been talking about, remember talking about thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and how those interplay together to form a picture of mental health or mental health problems, or anything on that spectrum that we talked about. And here, having last week focused on what we think about what we think, we focused on the thinking side. Here we turn very much to the behavioral side of cognitive behavioral therapy. But part of what I find encouraging is that we're not just disembodied brains. We live within a body. We're even promised that this body will be resurrected and perfected. So this body's not even temporary. This body is eternal. And so what's wonderful is that if you do get into thought patterns, grief is certainly one of them. Addiction is another. Things that would fit under diagnosable situations as well, like a generalized anxiety or a major depressive disorder, these sorts of things. We also, it works both directions. The same way that the thoughts can cause you to feel like I have no energy and I can't take any joy in anything and I just want to, or like Margaret pointed out, the other direction, sort of a manic, frenzied, I need to stay busy all the time because I don't want to think about anything. Well, our bodies can be a tool towards our thinking and our feeling. So if it's the more depressive response of not wanting to do anything, well, going out and doing something healthy with your body can actually help your thinking to be more helpful. If it's more the frenetic, well then slowing down that body and just forcing yourself to take in some time. You talk about like being out on the kayak and fishing or going for a walk or watching the sunset, that these bodies become tools in two directions. One, they become our way of being able to check. A lot of times the body is what lets us know, I'm not doing okay here. I thought I was doing okay. I'm not doing okay. Sometimes it's the body that tells us that. But the flip direction being that what we do with our physical bodies influences the way that we're thinking and the way that we're feeling. Now what it isn't, and Saunders is being careful about, is not a one-to-one. Go hang out with some friends and then you're going to be fine. It's not that, but it is, you can establish healthy patterns that will make healthy thinking and healthy feeling more likely than if you don't establish those healthy behavior patterns. And then similarly, as we've talked about a lot, there are unhealthy behavior patterns that can almost assure that there will be unhealthy thoughts and emotions as well. So recognizing them as a diagnostic tool and then as a therapeutic tool as well, I think is good to keep that in mind, because it's not just a chapter about what are healthy things to do, but we're going to touch on that, but it's a chapter about the way that our behaviors influence our thinking and our feeling, and can be an influence of good, a healthy influence towards our thinking and our feeling. So, just wanted to throw that as a sort of setting the frame. Yep, Margaret.
I was just thinking, food plays such a big role in our way of thinking because of chemicals and the vitamins and the nutrients that we have that helps the brain, goes to the nervous system, goes to the brain. So eating properly is tremendous in brain health, and I believe that. I've been looking into that.
Yeah.
And the food that we eat, it does so much work to our body. But we can't even get into how we don't know what we eat, but what it really does to us.
Yeah.
So we have to know how to eat, and we have to learn that as we get older. I'm getting older now, so I'm trying to learn that. And it's so important to know what to eat as we get older. When you're young, you just eat anything, you think you're okay, you're fighting everything. But when you get older, it's not the same.
Gary, it sounds to me like she wants to read the next section.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I think the next two, no, because the next two are 2 points you've made. Do you want to read the next two here?
I don't have my glasses.
Oh, all right. No. Well,
I didn't read it, so sorry.
no, yeah, there you go. So this is,
I've been reading.
I'll do it for her. Pretend this is Margaret. So I have a cheery smile. And all right, so this is neglecting health promoting behavior. Persons with depression and anxiety will not engage properly in healthy behaviors. They will not exercise enough. They will not take the time to prepare healthy meals. And they may unintentionally develop poor sleep habits. And then connected with that, modern life, the business of the family, and being too busy for fun. Modern life can cause depression because it is so busy that individuals, couples, and families neglect to do things that they enjoy. It is sensible and helpful to consider the joys of life as necessary to prevent or defeat depression and anxiety. So both of those things.
And that of course goes hand in hand, like you're talking about eating healthy, but how many people have to work 2 jobs, both parents, and they have no time to cook a
Right.
healthy meal, and they just order pizza, TV dinners or whatever. So it's sometimes for a lot of people very hard to manage that.
Before we take another comment, I'd like to jump in for a second about talking about.
You're in
the-
charge. Yep.
Thank you, sir.
You're already in.
It's your show. Yeah.
Well, it's my turn to say something, but I want to talk about the meal train here at church. Absolutely tremendous. And I think I was getting a meal 3 times a week for one person. And usually each meal had enough for about 4 meals. So if you do the math, but
You weren't withering.
I literally gained 15 pounds, okay? And it took me about 6 months to get it back off once I finally asked the people to please stop. In fact, for some of them, the only way I got them to stop was to invite them over, and I cooked the meal for them. Dave? Yeah. Yeah, I love to cook, but it's tough cooking for one, so it's as a lot of us know. But yeah, but the meal, and the other thing about the meal train is once in a while I'll drop off a meal at church, but most of the time someone came over and they would spend half an hour, 45 minutes, and that was that food was more important than the food I put down my mouth. It was the interaction and other people working together, and and it was something to look forward to. So that's another thing just to keep in mind. Any other comments about what Pastor Rob? Danielle?
To say, yeah, this is, I think almost understates when you have depression, the most basic things become so difficult. And this is a very good tool for me. I usually show up here showered, for the record. A very good tell for me is I am not doing well when I'm that it's when a spike has precipitated, it's just, that is the most difficult thing in the world. And it makes no sense.
No. Yes, sir. Elijah.
I also want to say when people go through something more trying, I think their natural personality makes a huge difference for what potential pitfall they're going to be tempted towards. Because I think it sounds what the author makes it sound like is that it says persons with mental health problems will almost inevitably withdraw from others. A lot of people do that, but there are other people like me who, if I'm going through something, I don't want to be by myself at all. Like I will seek out 24/7 being with people, and that's not always the most healthy behavior either, because then I have no time to be on my own and process things. So I just wanted to expand what he said a little bit more. Like a lot of people will inevitably withdraw, but others will do exactly the opposite. And I think it's just a matter of what personality you are.
There's a really great Bonhoeffer quote, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was the Lutheran pastor who opposed the Nazis and then ended up dying in a prison camp right at the end of the war. He wrote a great book called Life Together, but one of the quotes in that is that the person who cannot be by themselves cannot be trusted to be with others, and the person who cannot be with others cannot be trusted to be by themselves. So the whole idea, there has to be a balance. I like Elijah pointing out, and Margaret as well, the balance is going to be a different place for different people. So for the person who tends to be the extrovert, who might use a constant pattern of activity to avoid self-reflection, they need to be aware of that. That's the person who can't be by themselves and therefore cannot be trusted to be with others either. On the other hand, the person who knows their natural pattern is going to be to withdraw, to cocoon, to have no contact. That's the person who can't be with others and therefore cannot be trusted to be by themselves either. And so in his typical, he often speaks in that sort of dichotomous way, but that if you can't be with others, you can't be trusted to be by yourself, and if you can't be by yourself, you can't be trusted to be with others. Those activities, neither one of them should become the crutch by which you survive. And here's where I think Saunders honestly could have inserted a great deal more of our understanding of who we are in Christ. And that these are gifts, and sometimes gifts are burdensome. Caring for yourself can be a burden. Still the right thing to do, and sometimes it's just, I gotta do it because it's the right thing to do. But understanding what Christ has done for us, who we are in Him, that our identity doesn't hinge on whether we do this or not. If we miss a day of whatever the healthy behavior was, then we pick up the next day, because grace abounds, But I think it's good to point out that, because it was part of what I was trying to cue too. Saunders really leans heavily, and I suspect it's a reflection of what he's had to do clinically, on the danger of the isolating and the anhedonia, but I do think that's one particular flavor Maybe it's a very prominent flavor. It's not the only flavor of behavior that might be indicator of difficulty, or where a change in behavior could be more healthy toward healthy thinking and healthy feeling.
To go along with that, I think we all also have to really, really, really keep in mind that we're not all the same. This is not a fits all. This isn't like going to the doctor's and you have a broken arm and this is how we're going to fix it, you know, type thing. Because, you know, with people being different, it takes a lot of skill to figure out who this person is, where they're at, and where you should encourage them to be. But you also can't say you should be doing that, or you know that's about the worst thing that can happen. So anyway, anything else before we flip the page? Brenda.
One comment. I had a meeting with my functional doctor recently, and my numbers in certain areas were good, in other areas not so good, and I was frustrated by it. And she said, well, you know, as we get older, we have to work harder, which is your point, Margaret. We have to work harder. And I'm like, well, I already work pretty hard. All of the right things. I said, maybe I should
It can't be me.
But then, the reality is that, you know, we were talking earlier about this, you don't want to go out on a bad note. You want to do the best that you can for your body, wherever it is in life. And even though I may have to make more adjustments, it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's not like I can't do it. It's like, well, part of me is stubborn and doesn't want to do it, because it's like I'm already feeling deprived. I have to be even more deprived? Oh my God. But it's not as bad as that. Once you get into the reality of the situation, you realize, you know what? I can manage my life, and I can make choices that are better for me. And that's really what it takes, making the right choices. And if I can do that, then I can, you know, come to the end with the confidence that I did everything I could to take care of my body. So that working harder also means working smarter.
Yes, and I'd just like to add to that a little bit about having to work harder at it. And it helps a lot if you have someone to encourage you. I'm lucky enough, after about the same time I turned it around with the whole chapters in the book thing, I also met a very nice woman who actually, I remodeled her house 10 or 12 years ago. And her brother happens to be one of my very, very, very best friends. And he encourages it. And she's a very healthy person. She goes to the gym 4 days a week. So so I figured I better go for at least 3. And I do that now. So, but having, someone to, I'm to the point now, when I eat bad, I mean, I smoke about 18 things as a smoker. But she's encouraged me to eat like pork and beef only once a week type thing. And I'm trying to stick to that as best as I can. But,
Jackson had a hand and then.
Yeah, I know, Jackson. I didn't, please.
Well, we're talking about physical activity and how that affects spiritual health. One thing that pops into my mind, in particular, is walking. Is that we are created with bodies that are intended to walk something in the neighborhood of 10 to 20,000 steps a day, which is quite a lot. It's a high target in the modern world. To reach is doing natural things like that. But if you do start to feel anxiety building up, or at least if I start to feel anxiety building up, or isolation building up, or something like that, I tend to notice that just returning to one of the core functions of my body, water, everything helps. Like we were designed to restores the more complicated mental aspects as well. Psychosomatic. So, one of on the somatic side of that, one of the absolute first things is walking.
Yep.
Walking to the pizza parlor.
It's better than driving there.
Marjorie. Dave.
Drop something, they gotta go back.
I absolutely agree with what Jackson is saying. And whatever form of physical activity is appropriate, whether it's walking, hiking, being outdoors. I find if I'm not feeling well, I'm not something physical and getting my heart rate going, whether it's biking, hiking, doing anything that's exercise, it gets those endorphins going. For me, all of a sudden, I get a completely different perspective of, life and how I'm feeling and how I look at things versus how I looked at them or did look at them before. So I think the physical activity for me is something that really helps myself with my bearings and orientation, how I look at things.
Chrissy?
Between simple behaviors help to restore the more complex systems. And, we saw that, with Jesus today, doing simple things that help you heal in a very complex way. But a glass of cold water is so much better than hot cold. It's gonna restore your system, and it's amazing how, like you said, we are these psychosomatic beings, that whatever we do, just these tiny little steps can make a huge difference on the complexity of who we are inside without having to wrestle. Because sometimes, I feel like I've got to wrestle with problems to the ground. But you can't. It's too big, it's too complex, so much of it's out of your control. But you can do the simple things, and those really do help to heal the bigger issues, even just giving you a clearer head face. But it's kind of miraculous, actually, how that works. Like a simple glass of water, just a half-hour nap, something so simple and amazing can really restore the most complex parts.
Thank you. Why don't we try flipping the page, see if we can get a little bit done on the backside here. We still have some time. I'd like somebody, if they would, to read the opening and the advantages of advising. Somebody like to read a little bit? Elijah?
Would you like me to, oh wait, did we read the top of this page yet?
No, I'd like you to read that and then the first,
And then advantages.
and then advantages. The opening line there, please.
Cognitive therapy is the dominant form of therapy because, like the 800-pound gorilla, it is powerful. It is the most widely studied and most widely practiced form of therapy. Behavioral therapy, however, is also powerful and has some advantages over cognitive therapy. Advantages of advising about behavior. Behavioral issues leading to mental health problems are easier to identify than cognitive therapy. There is no fast-thinking version of behavior. Behavior is observed. Also, behaviors to combat mental health problems are straightforward. It is easy to evaluate whether someone has followed behavioral advice.
Thank you. You want to take a minute and just talk about cognitive versus behavioral?
Yeah, so, and that's why it's called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is the idea that you're gonna think about the way that you're thinking, but you're also gonna think about the way that your actions are influencing the way that you're thinking, and your thinking is influencing the way that you're acting. So we took a meshed topic, we divided it into two things, we're kind of scooshing them back together today. But the advantages here are, if you remember, the fast and slow thinking. Slow thinking is when you're aware that you're thinking about something. You're making a decision, you're trying to weigh all your options. Would this be better? Would that be better? Cognitive, that slow thinking is the sort of thinking where you might be considering asking somebody's advice or that sort of thing. Fast thinking is the instinctive, it's kind of embedded in who you are and how you function. It's the thinking that you're not aware that you're thinking. In fact, at one point he said, fast thinking is knowing. Something that you think that you automatically know. Well, actually your brain is having to think that through, but it's doing so through a completely different system. There is no fast thinking version of behavior. Maybe there is for you. I mean, it's always kind of a fun exercise to ask somebody, what would you do if you were going to impersonate me? What are the gestures or the facial expressions? Because we do, but the point being, they're observable. So I don't know what thoughts are happening in your head, except the ones that you can express to me. And the only ones you can express to me are the ones that you know are happening in your head. But your behaviors, I can see your behaviors. I know what you're doing. And I can even point out to you, hey, look at what you just did. From a behavioral standpoint. You might get to that point with cognitive thinking as well, where you could say, do you realize what you were just thinking and why that's not quite correct? But with behavior, it can be immediately observed. It can be seen, it can be known. So it is one of the advantages of talking about behavior with someone who's struggling, or with yourself, keeping in mind what are my healthy behaviors and am I doing them? Am I making it to the gym 3 times a week? Am I going to bed when I should be going to bed and turning off my electronic devices so that I'm in bed sleeping, not in bed on my phone or in bed watching TV? You know, am I taking these steps? It's a very easy and can be a fairly non-confrontational way to take a temperature of, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? It can be a lot harder to do that with our thought processes than with our physical activity. So if the thought processes are proving overly thorny, seeming overly tangled, maybe take a look at what behavior processes are around those, and can I tweak the behavior processes, and in the process maybe be able to cultivate better thought processes. So that's why cognitive behavioral therapy is by far the most used therapy. Although interestingly, it's a sidetrack, so I won't spend long on it, but like Jackson was talking about walking, Christy was talking about the simple things. There's another modality that's called EMDR, eye movement desensitization something. But it's extremely helpful with PTSD is what they use it for a lot. But what it started with was having exercises of people having to look back and forth. Then it moved into testing sounds on each side. What they found was basically it's needing to do activities that use both hemispheres of the brain. And if you're familiar, some activities of our brain, the whole left brain, right brain thing is a little bit outdated, but there is truth to the fact that some functions that we do are located in lobes that are on the left side, and some functions that we do are located primarily in lobes on the right side. But if you're also aware, the right side of your brain controls all the left side's activities. The left side of your brain controls all the right side's activities. And activities that engage both help the connections between the two. Even if the activity is walking, which inevitably requires 2 legs, anybody who's sprained an ankle knows this, right? So to walk, you have to engage both sides of your brain. Well, what's cool is if you strengthen those connections, you're strengthening those connections no matter the function that needs to use them later. So the ability for the lobes over here to communicate with the lobes over there, just going for a walk strengthens that ability simply by strengthening the connections on a brain level. This is from what I've read. Maybe this is out of date at this point. I'm not a brain scientist, but from what I've read, and it makes a ton of sense. So that you get back all the way to what would have been sort of folksy advice to begin with. If you're feeling crummy, why don't you get outside and go for a walk? Well, actually, there's a lot of brain science between both the outside part of that and the walking part of that. Go play catch. That requires a lot of brain communication. Go do something. You know, that's why people will find tennis or pickleball or biking or you know, these things that require our brains to function. I personally am a big fan too. We're going to get to this in just a little bit, but of the way that you can, if your brain is hung up on something, give it something else to do. Because a brain that functions well is a brain that functions well. So if it's not functioning well in this area, then give it something to do over in this area. Not as a full-bore escape, but give it a chance to shine a little bit. Give it a chance to do well. Same way a musician, if you're struggling on something, you go back and you play something easier. Rebuild a little confidence and then go back to it, right? It's that kind of it. Go do something that your brain enjoys doing, which I mean is you enjoying doing it, right? But go do something that comes easily, that comes naturally, as long as it's not an unhealthy behavior in and of itself, like Ken was talking about, the destructive patterns, then that actually there's a ton of science behind going for a walk. Gets you outdoors, gets you away from the phone and the computer, I hope. You know, those are all good things too, but even just on a brain level, you're helping the brain to be able to be as equipped as our brains can be. We're each unique, but I think that's good to keep in mind. And actually, I think I probably already overlapped a little bit into this next half of the quote block as well. Somebody want to do that? Is that okay?
Yeah, somebody read that.
The behavioral activation.
We have a volunteer. Christy.
Behavioral activation. Modern mental health professionals routinely give 2 pieces of behavioral advice versus instruction and anxiety. Go out with others and do fun things. Implementing behavioral activation can be a challenge. This is because thinking and associated emotions, come down to do that, are still at play when working to activate behavioral change. The strategies that mental health professionals use to increase the likelihood that someone will engage in behavioral activation focus, ironically, on thinking. Helping persons recognize that the way they are acting is unhealthy to their mental health. Helping persons ignore thinking and emotions that encourage unhealthy behavior. Helping persons plan enjoyable activities.
Which is a lot of what you do. You already delved into that, but do we have any more thoughts on that? No. Guess we covered.
I think the one thing I'll say is it also is a great tool, like the phrase that psychologists use, at least that I've seen, is displacement. It's a healthy tool for when there are intrusive thoughts, so it can be helpful for grief, it can be helpful for addiction recovery, is that you find something healthy to do that occupies your mind and your body, ideally. We had lunch together to prep and gave the example, and some of you have heard the example before, but at my previous church, when there was some chaotic situation that needed to be dealt with, and it was rough, it was when I first picked up mountain biking as a hobby, and part of what was great about that was because when you're mountain biking, you can't think about anything else, or else you're gonna end up in a heap on the ground pretty quickly. So my thoughts went from being very much fixated and sort of ruminating on this highly stressful situation that needed to be addressed, to where all I could think for that next hour or hour and a half was rock, tree, you know, and it gave me a tense. And then by the end of an hour and a half, you're more tired. You got a better shot at sleeping well that night. You got a better shot at kind of staying in balance. Not that, I mean, I'd be happy to go mountain biking with any of you, but not that that's going to be the displacement for everybody. But there was some intentionality there, and there was a counselor who helped me to realize that this is a good way to displace this stress, that you need something that's going to occupy your brain. However, I know it was okay, but like Christy likes to have exercise time that gives her a chance to think. You know, so she likes to be able to go for a run or for a road bike ride where she can think things through. Usually for me, for a displacement, I want to shut this thing off for a while, or at least shut it off from what I've been thinking about. So the displacement itself can differ, and and if you have others around you who can help you, you can sort of brainstorm what would that be. But the big thing that's really important is it's got to be something you enjoy. This isn't one of those things that says, all right, I'm going to finally start and now, you know, fill in the blank some healthy habit that you've never successfully established before in your life. This is probably not the time to do that. This is the time to say, what do I enjoy? So you like kayaking and going fishing. This is a chance to do that for solitude and reflection. So lean in on that, the fact that you love doing that. Something that you're naturally enjoying that finds a good way to displace whatever it is that's potentially leading you in negative directions. And that can be different. That could be something that is room to think and to process. That could be something that shuts off the ability to think and to process. It's going to be something that's healthy in and of itself, and you really lean in on that as this is necessary. This isn't me being selfish. It's the opposite of me being lazy. This is me taking the steps that are necessary to be who God created me to be. I think that's a really helpful side of behavioral. That's therapy. The same way that sitting and talking about how to think properly can be helpful, even just formulating what behaviors can I do that will help me to maintain a healthy pattern.
You know, I have something to talk about too. I mean, ever since I stopped working, because with my job, three times I've been pushed onto the floor, not, you know, in a bad way. It was seniors that were much older than me that knocked me onto the floor, and I don't want to tell anybody that. But then, and my coworkers with the COVID, I said, you know, I was hoping that we could get back to CVS, and somehow everybody, all of a sudden, people were coming to my house looking for them. I said, we have a good town and we always look after each other. And and they said I said I would make them banana breads, right? And I said, well, I'm like, you know, because we always enjoyed that. Whether they work with me or not, I would do that.
Yeah. So a healthy thing that you can do.
So I thought about that my healthy thing is doing that, knew that, but then all of a sudden, people just keep coming to my house looking for the banana breads. So well, I don't have a machine that I can just here's the bananas, and I don't have the bananas, and I can't just keep bringing bananas to you. But I said I don't mind doing them.
Well, it sounds like it's a good example, though, of finding something that you enjoy,
and then
that you could
top
do that's
of it all,
healthy.
I don't have a vehicle, so that was another thing.
Right.
So then they have this vehicle for me to go on. You know, coworkers have a place for a vehicle. Why aren't you coming back? Why aren't you coming back? Why aren't you doing it? So I'm in this in between, betwixt and between.
Sure.
Like,
Yep.
Because of course, it's nice, it's like this one day, and the next day you turn around and it's gorgeous out, so you don't know.
That's true.
So
Yep.
it's, the timing is hard, and changing of the, you know, how it is out in the world.
I think we've done a pretty good job about, in the next block coming down, about a lot of our favorites. I mean, we've heard about a bunch of different things that people do to, you know, to try and occupy the mind with healthy things, and you know, to you know, kind of cleanse your body both mentally and physically. So just take, we're getting close here. How about anybody want to read Applying Behavioral Principles? Brenda, thank you.
Luther's helpful advice regarding behavior to combat depression and anxiety is straightforward. His advice is commonsensical, and you can and should offer the same advice. It is advice given by mental health professionals. To start, evaluate a person's behavior. Then enlighten him or her about the importance of behavior. Next, encourage and advise him or her to change his or her behavior. The main behavioral goals to combat mental health problems are fun and socialization. They tend to go together.
I think that's very well stated. Yep. It is. It says almost commonsensical. That means that we know it without we're even thinking about it, but it's good to see it in writing. Yeah. I'm going to read that last section here. Diet, exercise, stress, and sleep habits are not easy to change from unhealthy to healthy. An effective way to convince someone to care for himself is to remind him that his capacity to care for others is compromised if he is not caring for himself. And that could be just as easily herself. There's no gender there, but just kind of a little bit of a wrap up of what we've gone through today. But it's 1:15, but if anybody has any more comments or something like that, we can certainly, if you want to stay, we can do a little bit more. Ken, and then,
Yeah, going back.
I'm sorry.
to my-
Good.
Sorry. Going back to my fellowship experience, it's explained to us that if we first don't have ourselves, then we can't be there for others. So we have to get a hold of ourselves and try to maintain that. Show up for life today and be there for all those important people in our life.
thank you. Danielle?
It's not dissimilar to what Ken said, it's just the old, secure your own oxygen mask first.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Christie.
Christy?
This is kind of bouncing on something Phyllis said very early on. It can be hard to do that sometimes, but it helps with it. I don't know, an action. If you're, aware of people around you and trying to understand their needs, I think, sometimes you need to turn that inward and have compassion on yourself. And give you the grace, give yourself the grace to be depressed or anxious. And then give yourself the compassion and the grace to work through those things.
Thank you. Jackson?
One way to formalize that thought that I was engaging is to just say, imagine if you were the person that you had been, imagine if you were another person you had been trusted and caring for.
Yep.
What would you do in that situation?
Yep.
Yep.
If you frame it that way, the proper actions seem kind of obvious and beautiful, but if you only talk about, what do I want you to do, it's a lot easier than you see.
Very good. Anyone else before I ask Pastor to say a word of prayer? Please. Anyone? Yes, we've got three. Okay, here we go. Go ahead.
So I just want to say one thing. Many times in life we see from the people around us. Later in life we think, well, that's what not to do. I learned what not to do from certain people. And other people, and I'm not saying that it's all or nothing. You learn both. And I would just like to say, between Gary and these types of studies, I think the sharing within this group, and Gary, seeing him go through what he's gone through, has been such an eye-opening educational experience. I know Kirsten and I always talk about, Gary, and there's been people in our lives that have done the shutdown thing or the busy thing, and I was just always impressed by Gary, where he struck this balance of diversifying his interests, keeping busy but keeping it real, like being able to talk about things, not avoiding them with those activities, but always telling us what he was doing, and then how many people he was, visiting with. And I think that you just came up with, whether it was instinctual or not, such a therapeutic way of, going through what you have gone through. And I'm impressed, and I've just always been like locking that away and thinking, if and when I need to use that, that is a tremendous model, better than anybody I've ever seen, of handling, I know we've talked a lot about grief, but it's an important subject. Handling your grief, it's just been very impressive. And I just want to say that being your friend and seeing this firsthand, I'm impressed every single day. And I thank you for teaching not only us, but this group and anyone that is going to participate online and see this, because you've given a gift to everyone else on how, if you even help one or two people to cope better than they would have without knowing your story and seeing this, what an amazing gift you've given. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Lynette?
I was just gonna say, something that you brought up earlier, if anybody wants to be part of the meal train, let me know.
Yeah. Well, the iron's hot.
Yeah, thank you.
I do get a chance to hear from people, and I know Lene does too, how much of a blessing that is. And actually we've got, sometimes, you can't make it to the person's house, you can bring it to the church, and either someone else can bring it or the person can pick it up here, that sort of thing. Yeah, that's a wonderful, practical way to be able to help. So the one thing that I wanted to throw in too, and then I'll pray, was to talk about, chapters. And you're starting with regards to grief, and this can be true. It doesn't have to be grief. It could be it could be a mental health problem. It could be. We as Christians have a wonderful advantage that we know that whatever chapter we're writing right now is not the final chapter. And I genuinely do not know at this point how people who don't have that confidence function, because every chapter I've written has been flawed. And I have every reason to believe all of the next ones are also going to be flawed, except the last one. The last one is when Christ will restore that which has been lost. All the text of be still my soul. When it talks about from His own treasure He can repay all that He takes away. So we have the promise that while there will not be a perfect chapter in this life, there is a perfect chapter coming, and it will be the final chapter, although it will be unending. And so with that certainty in mind, we take the steps we can take now. We try to do like Paul talks about, take every thought captive to the Word of God, right? That would be the cognitive side. Paul also talks about, I beat my body and make it to obey me, so that would be more the behavioral side, not that you would physically be beating your body, but he talks about the way an athlete disciplines himself to run the race. Is the race that I'm running less important than theirs, that I wouldn't discipline my body to try to do that which is healthy? But recognizing we're gonna have successes, we're gonna have failures in these chapters. There's still another chapter coming. So maybe this is one that's full of success. Maybe this is one we really just have to muddle our way through. But there is another chapter coming, and that as a Christian trying to approach mental health is a huge advantage over anyone else's approach. So I'm thankful to God for that. So with that in mind, let's close in prayer. And then you got a couple of weeks to finish up the last 2 chapters in the book, because remember, not next week, because I'll be away, not the week following, because that's Labor Day. So September 8th we'll be doing, and I actually need to confirm whether that was originally going to be Bud Williams, and I'm not sure if it still is. So who's going to be teaching at that time is still also, I think, up in the air a little bit, but we got a little time to nail that down. Let me close this with prayer. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for the confidence that we are given in your word, though we didn't take the time to read all of the Bible passages at the beginning. Those who have read the text or read the full online handout have seen that these are things that you have taught us through your word and as truth. And As we've been given these bodies and minds and spirits, we pray that we would use them in ways that honor you. And when we find that that's difficult to do, by your Spirit, give us strength. Help us to rely on that which you have accomplished and that which you have promised. And help us to live out these chapters of our lives as healthy and effective as we possibly can be, not to our own glory, but to yours. I thank you for each person here, their willingness to share with one another and support one another, and pray that that would continue to be the case, not just today, but throughout the days of this week and throughout our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And let's say thank you to Gary for being here. All right. Have a good week, everybody.